Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to take a close look at Sharkoon's slightly bizarre REV220. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so today's video we're going to be taking a look at Sharkoon's latest and greatest. This is the REV220. This is based very much on the REV200 version, if you've already seen that. It has a few slight differences, namely the front panel's completely changed, but other than that, the rest of the setup is pretty much the same. So if you like the REV200, the REV220 might be the ideal upgrade for you. So some of the main features of this particular case. Obviously, we've got a tempered glass side window, and the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed already it's on the wrong side. Now, it's not technically on the wrong side because this is a semi-inverted motherboard setup. So the motherboard is rotated 90 degrees. So rather than your traditional I/O being on the rear of the chassis, we've now got the I/O which comes out of the top of the chassis. But don't worry, it's absolutely fine. It's all covered up, looks really neat, and actually is a refreshing change to the pretty much boring PC segment at the moment. Also, in this particular case, a slight rarity these days, we've got 5 included fans straight out of the box. 3 120mm fans up front, and in the rear we've got 2 120mm ARGB fans. So addressable RGB fans, you can rejoice in this. We've got plenty of illumination. And that actually translates also to the front of the case. As you can probably see from some of the B-roll and also from this footage, there is a really nice addressable RGB strip, which is hidden behind this panel at the front. So you haven't got that kind of overblown RGB, but you've certainly got a really nice look. The front panel has this really nice carbon fiber effect, which again is a little bit different. Sharkoon really do like to do that. They do take the PC design languages and twist it around and come up with something completely unique. And for sure, I've not seen a case anything like this before in my life. Well, apart from the REV200, but again, that is Sharkoon, so it's understandable. So flexibility in this case, we've got options at the front for a 360mm radiator. In the rear, we've got options for up to a 280mm radiator, or 240s, or obviously slightly smaller if you wish to. But essentially, this case, straight out of the box, is set up for airflow. Now you're probably thinking, but Mike, it hasn't got mesh on the front. Where's the airflow coming from? But that's easily remedied. The side of this particular case, both sides actually, have got pretty much a full mesh down both sides. Also, the bottom panel is completely open and unrestricted. So the filter on the inside, which we'll take a look at in a little bit, actually does all the filtration, so you actually get a really decent airflow. Now I will be doing some in-depth testing in this particular chassis in coming videos. We won't be doing it in this particular video, this is just an overview and a kind of introduction to the case. But I will be doing a live build in this, and also then doing follow-up video for thermals and all that kind of stuff in a later video. So if you want to see how those go, don't forget to click on the subscribe icon and the chime icon, and you'll be notified of future video releases. So apart from having fantastic cooling straight out of the box, it also has flexibility for installing a graphics card of up to 32cm long, an absolute whopper. Now depending on what motherboard you put inside here, you may have a slight restriction to about 28cm if you decided to put a micro ATX board in here due to the layout, but I don't think this particular system is designed for that kind of board. This really needs an ATX board, and you can actually probably even get a full-size EA-ATX board in there. It's not said on the documentation anywhere or the details that is supported, but certainly looking inside, it looks like we've got plenty of room, so extended ATX is a definite possibility. Obviously, do check out your motherboard and also the dimensions of this before you go ahead and make a purchase. So that's some of the main features out of the way. So let's take a look at the case itself. We'll do a tour, have a look inside, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. So first of all, the front panel and the addressable RGB. We can't really escape that. It's all over the place. There is a built-in addressable RGB controller, so if you don't have addressable RGB on your motherboard, then you can make use of the reset button, which out of the box is wired up, so you can just press the button and you can cycle through any of the 14 modes that are included straight away. The addressable RGB controller also has flexibility for adding additional addressable RGB fans and components such as RGB strips, and it works on the standard 5V 3-pin headers that we're normally used to seeing, which is great to see. The exact flexibility of that addressable RGB controller we'll take a look at when we open up the case. So starting off, the front panel, in my personal opinion, is pretty spectacular. The carbon fiber look on the front is definitely a new thing. I don't think I've seen any other cases with that particular look. And the slightly sunken in or recessed area where the RGB is in the front, I think looks great. It's not in your face, you don't have the mesh or massive halo fans in the front. So if you want something which is slightly more subdued than some of the other cases on the market, it's definitely worth a look. Taking off the front panel, or the front enclosure, you can see we've got this really nice mesh area with filtration, and this door can come off for easy washing and cleaning, all that kind of stuff. Or if you want to, for more airflow, you can just leave it off altogether. It doesn't need to be in there, but it is quite nice to have and will stop all those dust bunnies accumulating on the inside of the case. It fits in really nice and easily, just 2 latches on that side, and it's magnetic, so that keeps it into place. Really good job. The one thing I don't like on this case at the moment is the fact that the addressable RGB connection is connected captively. There's no kind of metal spring points, which would have been nice to have seen, especially in a case in this price range. The price range of this is a little bit more than we're used to seeing here on Mike's Unboxing, so this is in the kind of €100 mark at the moment. UK pricing at the moment is still a bit sketchy because it's not officially been released, but certainly in Europe this is retailing for approximately €107, so that relates to around about £90 to £100 here in the UK, depending where you're shopping. But having said that, around about £90 to £100, and to get 5 included fans and the addressable RGB controller and actually pretty stellar build quality, I think this could be a winner. Taking a closer look at the actual fan setup, so in this front section you've got 3 installed 120mm fans. These are non-addressable RGB but are of a good quality and actually come with 3-pin PWM style fan header connectors. Unfortunately there isn't a fan controller built into this. That would have been nice to have seen, so do make sure that your motherboard has enough physical connectors to connect up all these fans. Otherwise you can just get hold of one of those cheap fan splitters, which will cost you a couple of pounds but obviously will increase the costs overall. The fans themselves can be removed if you wanted to and can be replaced with 2 140mm fans, or if you're using a AIO radiator, that kind of thing, you can put in here a 120, a 140, 240, 280 or 360mm radiators, so plenty of flexibility. And also there is a little bit of depth there as well, so if you wanted to have some kind of push-pull configuration, so you take advantage of these fans and the fans on your AIO, there's certainly enough depth in there to do that. Unfortunately the fans themselves do have to remain mounted on the inner frame of the case due to the fact that the RGB intrudes on this space a little bit, so unfortunately you can't mount these fans on the front section to give you even more depth. So I'm going to go ahead now and disconnect the RGB so we can have a closer look on the inside. Now I've got this front panel completely disconnected, you can get an idea of the filtration. So we've got all these open section here, same on the other side. We've also got a completely open section where the grab handle is, and the top is completely sealed off. I think this is going to be more than enough room to get plenty of airflow into the case. And as you can see, got a pretty decent long length there for the addressable RGB connector, and like I said, it's the standard 5V 3-pin setup, which is used on pretty much most motherboards, MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, etc, etc. The front panel itself is actually a little bit of a fingerprint magnet because of the satin matte sheen to it, and it's actually pretty heavy and has got virtually no flex to it whatsoever. So taking a look at the rear of the chassis, now this is where things get a little bit interesting. So as you can see, you've got your standard area in the bottom for where your power supply goes, which we're used to seeing, but this section here is completely new to most people. So this section here is your ventilation for your 2 fans. Like I said before, you can put in here 2 120mm fans, which are included in the box, or if you wanted to, you could take those out and put in a radiator of some sort, or 140mm fans. So you can get 280mm worth of fans in this rear section. So with 3 fans in the front, 2 fans in the rear, plus the exhaust for the power supply, you're still going to have pretty much a positive pressure system. And looking at the top, this is where it gets a little bit weird. So this section here, we've got a rubber grommet, and this is for passing your I/O cables through and things like your monitor, your keyboard, mouse, all those kinds of things, maybe even an Ethernet connection. So if I flip the case round and you can see the top, you can get a better idea of what I mean with the I/O. So now we're looking at the top of the case, and as you can see, you've got your traditional layout for the front I/O. So you've got a power button, nice clicky power button. You've got a pair of USB 3.0 ports and a pair of USB 2.0 ports. 4 USBs on the front is always a winner in my book. Also, we've got separate audio jacks for microphone and headphones. This section here is more ventilation, and this comes out quite easily. It's just a magnetic grip in there, and it's filtered as well. But this is where your rear I/O is, or top I/O as it is in this particular case, because the motherboard is rotated 90 degrees. So as you can see, we've got the cutout section at the bottom here for the I/O, which is where your motherboard would traditionally go, so keyboard, mouse, all that kind of stuff. And also, because of where that is really close to where that rubber grommet is, so you don't have to worry too much about having longer cables, because it's actually only about 4 or 5 inches away from where they would normally be anyway on the rear. Also, you've got all of these removable plates, so you've got room for up to 7 PCI Express devices. Although these days, I guess most people would only use maybe a triple slot graphics card and possibly one other extra card, maybe a capture card, that kind of thing. So space for that is going to be no problems at all. So just so we can get a better idea of what is going on, if I remove the tempered glass side panel, which is held on with thumb screws on the rear rather than being actually holes in the glass, which is always nice to see. And this comes off with a hinged kind of front, so there's little plastic lugs which fit into the recesses at the front. The glass itself is pretty much a minimal smoke tint, not much going on there at all. So it will hide up some of your kind of less desirable objects, but will also let the light come bleeding through when you want it to. So this is where it gets weird and interesting at the same time. So we've got a reasonably normal layout. So we've got a power supply basement in this bottom section, which then drops down a little bit lower towards the front, where you can have that extra room for your graphics cards. So again, your graphics cards are going to come down in this position here, although if you're using micro ATX, then you might find them closer to here. So this section may impede graphics cards with mini ITX systems, but you don't want to put a mini ITX in here. You really, really don't. You really want a nice, really big board on there to get the full use of the space available. Also, if you want to, at the front there is a removable plastic panel, which you can just pop that out, and as you can see, that gives you a little bit more depth for extra fans, so if you're putting a radiator in there. And also this section here, which is cut out, which goes into here, would be ideal for 360mm AIO radiators, because your pipes are going to come out at the bottom there. So the pipes can come out and then gently flow back up towards where they're meant to be on the CPU. That is a really nice inclusion, and I'm glad they've done that. If there wasn't that cutout, I think things would be a little bit more problematic when trying to fit larger radiators. And also, ideally with an AI1 cooler, you don't want your pipes coming out at the top. In this particular instance, because they would hit this part, the top section, but also if you get any air in your system, that is going to be a source of noise and also could eventually run dry and damage your pump. So in this section, we've got a really nice area for mounting a motherboard. I think building this is going to be a little bit of a weird thing because a lot of us tend to have a bit of muscle memory on how motherboards go together. And certainly when I built a previous system, I had issues with it being completely inverted. So we'll see how this goes with 90 degrees inversion or rotation even. Should be quite an interesting build. Talking of interesting, we've got some kind of odd placements, but they're not odd if you think about it in terms of how the motherboard goes in. So we've got this really big cutout section here for custom cooling, for air coolers, that kind of thing, or mounting brackets, which is nice to see. And it's actually, the rest of it is pretty much solid, so that's going to add to the rigidity of the case, which in itself is actually pretty decent, and the steel is really nice and thick. There is a cable pass-through here at the bottom, and also you've got 2 rubber grommets in the power supply area, so these are going to be perfect for bringing through cables for your graphics card. So your graphics card is generally going to be round about in this area for the power supply connection. So literally you're going to have a tiny little cable coming through this grommet into the graphics card. So it's going to look super, super neat. Also for things like your CPU power or your main motherboard power, the 24-pin connector, that can come through from this grommet and will plug in somewhere pretty much here. So again, cable management is going to be fantastic in this. There's going to be very little of your larger cables actually physically on show. When we get up to the top section, again, where our normally your 8-pin CPU power is going to be, there's another hole there as well for running cables through. There isn't a rubber grommet on that one, unfortunately, but because of where it is, it's going to be very difficult to see. And if you're using a decent power supply or a black type power supply with black cable in, it's going to be very hard to notice. The power supply basement does have a little bit of ventilation to it, which may or may not help or hinder things, depending on what you're putting actually inside it. And there's a pretty good clearance between the fans as well, so you shouldn't have any issues here. If you've got a motherboard with a massive heatsink on the VRM, because you've got 240 mils here, this is going to pull heat straight out of the back. Also, your CPU cooler is going to be in this section, so you're going to get all your cold air coming in, going straight into your graphics card and also past it. So we should have some pretty good ventilation on here. There's some really nice little neat channels as well. So if you are into your RGB lighting, there's a strip or section at the very bottom there, which you could easily put a magnetic or just a normal RGB strip in there, which would then illuminate this side section, which they've actually done in their demonstration video on the Sharkoon website. And the same goes for the top. There's a nice little recess there, so you can have some downlighting if you've got some particular components you want to highlight. So moving around to the back of the case. So again, we've got captive thumb screws pretty much throughout, which is really nice to see. And it's hinged again on these front sections, which again helps with cable management. So you can get it clipped in and then push it back in, and there's a little bit of flex to the panel, but not a great deal. So again, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. So as you can see, I've deliberately used a power supply with a little bit of contrast so you can see where it goes, and you can fit up to a 200mm power supply in there, and there's also plenty of room for stuffing cables. The entire back section here has got loads and loads of areas for routing cables through. It would have been nice to have seen a few more areas possibly around here with tie down points, but you have got some tie down points in pretty key places around here in this central section and all down this area. Some of the things which I don't like about the fans is the fact that the fans actually come with both MOLED and your traditional kind of PWM style fan headers. I think one of the first things I'll be doing is chopping off those MOLED connectors just to create a bit more room and actually make the build look a little bit more tidy. The main I/O cables have got plenty of length for them and are pretty much blacked out all the way, pretty much to the end, so nothing to really complain about there. Again, you've got your USB 3.0, you've got your HD audio, and you've got your USB 2.0. And there's also your reset, power switch, HD, LEDs, all that kind of stuff on your normal cables as you'd expect to see. There is also another cable which runs from the reset switch, which has been plugged into the RGB controller, as you can see there. And also the RGB controller requires SATA power, which I've plugged in and is down here. There is also an additional cable for the controller, so if your motherboard has its own addressable RGB controller, you can bypass straight through and you can just use the standard connection. It's got the VDG in and also your traditional 5V addressable RGB headers there. So again, you can pop that through straight into there and that would connect to where your motherboard would generally have its headers. If not, the cable's pretty long and will go into pretty much most directions to connect up where you need it to, so no issues there. As it comes out of the box, you've got the two front fans connected to the RGB header already, or addressable RGB header already, leaving you with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left. One of these will be used for connecting up the front panel addressable RGB. So again, you've got a lot of options there, and you can also get a splitter on those as well if you wanted to. Being that it's SATA powered, it will be pretty resilient and you can add on quite a few devices without causing any problems. So going back to the actual layout, so again, we've got punch outs in pretty much most of the normal places, although they probably don't look normal to you because this is rotated 90 degrees, as I said previously. So power supply wise, like I said, up to a 200mm power supply. There is ventilation both top and bottom, so you can decide which way you want to have it facing. Also in this bottom section, there are two removable hard drive caddies, and these can take a 3.5 and a 2.5 drive each. Or if you want to, you could put two 2.5s in each one. Also, there's an additional two removable slots here. So you can put 2.5-inch drives on those, so that's pretty easy to do. These bottom brackets I did find a little bit fiddly to get out. There's a single thumb screw which holds them in. And these are pretty solid. You've got rubberized grommets, so if you're using a mechanical drive, that's going to reduce some of the vibrations. And you can put the 3.5-inch drive in this bottom section, and then you can mount another 2.5-inch drive on the top. So in total, you can install two 3.5-inch drives plus an additional four 2.5-inch drives, which I think is plenty. One of these will actually need to be removed if you do plan to put a 360mm radiator in there, just to let you know that. That will give you the room in this bottom section, so then that is going to reduce what you can actually put in hard drive wise. I think most people probably stick to air cooling in this particular setup. It would be nice to have some water cooling in there, but I think actually because it comes with the fans anyway in the box, it's quite a nice reliable setup. So we'll take a quick look at the bottom of the chassis. So on the bottom we've got a removable grille, which is quite a nice mesh grille for the power supply. You've also got slightly raised up as well with these just about 1.5 feet, and all the feet have rubber paddings on the bottom to stop any vibrations. Weirdly, one of my rubber feet was missing on this particular review sample, so I've had to improvise with some sticky 3M tape from a GoPro, but it does the job. Obviously yours will be absolutely perfect out of the box, or at least you would hope so. On this bottom section also you can see the kind of where the hard drive caddies slot on. So again, it's actually really nicely built, very strong, very sturdy. There's quite a decent weight to it. The actual chassis itself, without anything installed, is about 9 kilos, so it's pretty weighty. But overall, I think it looks really good. It's a very interesting design. Again, I've not seen anything like this. I've never actually built a system in a 90 degrees rotation, so this is going to be a really interesting one. And I've got to be honest with you, I'm actually super pumped building it. So if you want to watch the build live, don't forget to click the subscribe button. and we'll do some further testing once it's all built up. Again, let me know what you'd like to see put in this. I'm thinking it's around about £100 case, so we're not going to go crazy with it, but I would say something like a modern Ryzen 3 with maybe a 2070 graphics card, that kind of thing, I think would be what most people would be aiming at in this. But let me know what you think about it in the comments section. I think that pretty much wraps it up. A slightly unusual, but actually quite an endearing case at the moment. I'm quite attached to it already, but again, depending on how the build goes, that may change very quickly. But there you go, that has been the Sharkoon REV220. I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.